Alrighty, so today I'm going to be walking through the Surfside condo collapse, which happened in Florida in 2021. So this is a Google Earth image of the condo, and the highlighted orange part is the part that ended up collapsing. And then the pool deck also collapsed first, and there's also a parking garage below the whole structure. So construction for the condo began in the 1970s, and it began with the parking garage. And so the parking garage, there are these main columns, but there are also these things called half walls, which connected the columns, which still need to be properly reinforced, which they weren't. As you can see, this image of the half wall, the only reinforced part you can see is right here. And so they ended up having to fix that, but the contractor decided just to put steel plates in there instead of actually redoing it, which ended up not being great. So in 2014 and 2018, there were engineering reports done after the inspection. And so there were reports of water damage, both on the chemical level and on the erosion side. And then there's also signs of honeycombing, which is when the concrete is poured for the building. And that's what's shown to the right, which just have air pockets, which isn't good. And then the half wall also made an appearance, and it was deemed structurally inadequate. So this is an image of the parking garage. The columns that are white are slightly bigger than the columns that are red, but they still aren't up to code. They don't have the amount of rebar that needs to be in them, and they aren't properly spaced. And then as you can see, the columns right here are very far apart, and that was to allow for more parking. But as you can see, it probably wasn't worth it. And then the beams that are white were ones that were in the original designs and were constructed. And the beam in red were in the original design, but it ended up not being constructed, which is bad and led to a lot of cracking in the surface slab above it. And what the owners decided to do to fix this was they decided to cover up the cracks by just pouring more concrete over the slab, which was not good. Another part of the structure that was very important was the outer collar of the building. And basically this acted as a clamp for about 40 years, keeping the system in static equilibrium and keeping it from falling apart or tilting on the columns. So after the collapse happened, engineers decided to look at what was left after the collapse and then compare that to the original designs that the building was constructed under to see if there were any signs of weakness. And then after they did that, they listened to the firsthand accounts of people that survived it and basically took all of that and put it into computer generated models to see what was most realistic and what actually happened. So the collapse happened at 1 a.m. June 24, 2021, and residents reported a loud boom sounding, and engineers think that this was the rebar in the collar that was actually fracturing and being torn apart after years of stress. And after the parking garage failed, right here mainly, the middle part of the building ended up collapsing down, which left just this side part swaying for a few minutes before it finally crashed as well. The part of failure that happened with the parking garage is called a punching shear. And basically that's when the slab, as you can see, is remaining pretty much intact, but the columns are very much intact with a few little stray rebar pieces. And basically this happened because the columns were pretty sturdy in and of themselves, but they were too far apart. And so all the stress was on the slab of concrete and this rebar right here. After this happened, these drop beams were pulled out underneath the columns of the main center part of the building, which caused them to buckle and then caused the middle part to collapse. So the cause of failure is definitely engineering malpractice, both in the construction of it, on the contractor's side as well, and then also in the inspection part. There's poor maintenance by the building owners, and then there's failure to fix the weaknesses that were known in the building. There were engineering reports done, investigations done, and no one did anything to enforce change or actually fix it. What should have been done, the constructing engineer should have been held accountable at first sign of malpractice instead of being allowed to continue. And the owner should have looked more into the structural integrity of the building especially since there are a lot of visible damages. There were known damages, especially in the reports, and there's even cracking that was visible in water damage, but they were way bigger than anyone thought, but they still should have been looked into more. The ramifications of the failure, 98 people ended up dying, and then the grief of loved ones was felt all over the world. Due to this failure, though, other buildings in the area have been playing it safe, which means that if there are any similar signs of failure in their own building, they decided just to shut it down because they don't want a catastrophe to happen like what happened at Surfside. This is definitely considered a disaster. The media framed it in the way where it seemed most tragic. Um, there was 98 deaths, as I said, and then President Biden ended up making a release statement about it, so it reached all the way to the Capitol. This is definitely a sign of negligence, both in the constructing part of it, the ownership of it, and then the investigation of it on the engineer's part. And then the job of an engineer is to mitigate risk because you can't fully get rid of it. And no one did that along the whole process, really. And then they didn't act as Christ would have us act by making sure we place human lives above time, money, or material costs to fix the building. This is my bibliography. So let me know if you guys have any questions.